The year was 570 CE. An army of elephants marched toward Mecca. Their mission, destroy the Kaaba. Abraha, the Abyssinian ruler of Yemen, commanded the most powerful military force Arabia had ever seen. Thousands of soldiers, war elephants, advanced weapons. The Quraysh fled to the mountains. They abandoned the city. They couldn't fight. They had no chance. And yet the Kaaba was never touched. Allah sent birds from the sky carrying stones of baked clay. The army was obliterated. Abraha was destroyed. The Kaaba stood untouched, miraculous, divine, unforgettable. But here's the question that haunts every thinking Muslim. If Allah protected the Kaaba from Abraha with such a clear, undeniable miracle, why didn't he protect it from the Umayyads when they catapulted it during the siege of Ibn Zubayr? Why didn't he protect it when the Karamita stole the black stone and kept it for 22 years? Why didn't he protect it from fire, from floods, from destruction that came after Islam? What changed? Why does Allah intervene sometimes and not others? The answer will shatter everything you think you know about how Allah's protection works. And it will change how you understand every crisis in your own life. To understand why Allah protected the Kaaba from Abraha, you have to understand what was at stake. This wasn't just about a building. This was about the survival of Tawheed on earth. The Kaaba in the year 570 was the last remaining symbol of Ibrahim's legacy. Yes, the Quraysh had corrupted it. Yes, they had filled it with idols. Yes, they were worshipping everything except Allah alone. But buried beneath all that shirk was still the foundation of Tawheed, the structure that Ibrahim and Ismail built with their own hands. The house that was raised for the worship of Allah. And deep in the hearts of some Arabs, though distorted and confused, there was still a memory, a faint echo of the original message. La ilaha illallah. If Abraha had succeeded, if the Kaaba had been destroyed, that echo would have died. The physical connection to Ibrahim would have been severed. The Arabs would have fully submitted to foreign powers, either Christian Abyssinia or Zoroastrian Persia. There would have been no center, no identity, no anchor, and more importantly, there would have been no stage for the final prophet. Because Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was born in that very year, the year of the elephant, his mission was tied to that house. His call would begin in that city. His message would purify that structure. Allah wasn't protecting the Quraysh. He was protecting the plan, the divine plan that had been in motion since Ibrahim laid the first stone. Abraha didn't wake up one day and decide to destroy the Kaaba out of nowhere. He had built a massive cathedral in Sana'a, Yemen, called Al-Kulays. It was magnificent, towering, expensive. He wanted to redirect the Arab pilgrimage from Mecca to Yemen. He wanted political control, economic dominance, and religious authority. But the Arabs didn't care about his church. They still went to Mecca. So a man from the Banu Kinana tribe, out of anger and contempt, went to Al-Kulays and defiled it. He desecrated the church. When Abraha heard about this, he was enraged, not just insulted, but strategically threatened. He swore he would march to Mecca and demolish the Kaaba stone by stone. So he mobilized, he gathered an army, and most famously, he brought elephants. In Arabia, no one had seen war elephants before. These were tanks of the ancient world, massive, terrifying, unstoppable. The sight of them alone would break the morale of any defense. Abraha marched north, crushing any tribe that resisted. When he reached the outskirts of Mecca, he sent a message to the Quraysh: surrender the city or we destroy it. The Quraysh had no army that could match his, no strategy, no hope in their own strength. So their leader, Abdul Muttalib, the grandfather of the Prophet Muhammad, went to meet Abraha. Abraha was surprised. He expected Abdul Muttalib to beg for the Kaaba's safety, to negotiate, to plead. But instead, Abdul Muttalib asked for the return of his camels that Abraha's soldiers had seized. Abraha was shocked. He said, You come to me asking about camels, and you don't ask me to spare the house that is the religion of your fathers?" And Abdul Muttalib gave a response that echoes through history. He said, "I am the Lord of the camels, and the house has a Lord who will protect it." That statement wasn't arrogance, it was pure tawheed. It was complete reliance on Allah. He knew he couldn't protect the Kaaba, but he knew who could. Abdul Muttalib returned to Mecca and told the people to evacuate. "Take your families to the mountains, leave the city." And so they did. The Quraysh abandoned Mecca. They left the Kaaba undefended, and Abraha's army moved in, ready to demolish it. But then something happened that no military strategy, no human power, no logic could explain. The lead elephant, the largest one named Mahmud, refused to move toward the Kaaba. They beat it. They pulled it. They tried everything. When they turned it toward Yemen, it ran. When they turned it toward Syria, it moved. But toward the Kaaba, it sat down. It wouldn't budge. And then the sky darkened. Flocks of birds appeared, not normal birds. The Qur'an calls them Tayr Ababil, birds in flocks sent by Allah. Each bird carried 3 stones, small stones of baked clay, and they began to drop them on the army. When a stone hit a soldier, it didn't just injure him, it destroyed him. It would pierce through his body, tearing through flesh like a disease. The army began to collapse. Panic spread. Soldiers fled. Abraha himself was struck. His body began to decay piece by piece until he died a humiliating death back in Yemen. His fingers fell off, his limbs rotted. He returned defeated, destroyed, a warning to anyone who dares to attack the house of Allah. Allah immortalized this event in Surah Al-Fil. Have you not seen how your Lord dealt with the companions of the elephant? Did he not make their plan into misguidance? And he sent against them birds in flocks, striking them with stones of hard clay, and he made them like eaten straw. This was a public miracle, witnessed by thousands, an event so undeniable that it became the historical marker for an entire generation. People didn't say, the year 570. They said, the year of the elephant. And in that very year, in that very city that Allah had just defended, the final prophet was born. So why was the protection so clear, so miraculous, so immediate? Because the context demanded it. Islam had not yet come. The revelation had not yet been sent. The Kaaba was still the only symbol, however corrupted, that connected people to the legacy of Ibrahim. If it had been destroyed before the Prophet's mission began, there would be no Mecca to return to, no Kaaba to purify, no center for the Ummah. Allah was protecting the future, not the present. He was preserving the stage upon which the final act of human guidance would unfold. The Quraysh didn't deserve that protection, their idols didn't deserve it, but the plan of Allah did. But here's the key. Once Islam came, once the revelation was complete, once the Prophet established the religion, the rules changed. Because now the protection of Islam was no longer just Allah's direct intervention. It became the responsibility of the believers. Allah says in the Qur'an, "Indeed, Allah will not change the condition of a people until they change what is in themselves." The age of miracles for the preservation of buildings was over. Now it was about the preservation of faith, of Iman, of the message. The Kaaba is sacred, yes, but it's stone. It can be rebuilt. What cannot be rebuilt, what must be protected at all costs, is Tawheed. And that protection was placed in the hands of the Muslims. Fast forward to the year 64 AH, during the First Islamic Civil War. Yazid ibn Muawiyah was the Umayyad ruler, and Abdullah ibn Zubayr, the companion's son, refused to give him allegiance. Ibn Zubayr took refuge in Mecca and declared himself the rightful caliph. Yazid sent an army to siege the city. They surrounded Mecca, they set up catapults, and they began hurling stones at the Kaaba. Fire broke out. The Kaaba was damaged. The black stone cracked from the heat. This wasn't an external enemy. This was Muslims attacking the Kaaba, Muslims destroying the house that Allah had protected from Abraha. So where were the birds? Where were the stones of clay? Where was the divine intervention? The absence of the miracle wasn't because Allah didn't care. It was because the test had changed. The protection of the Kaaba from Abraha was Allah showing His power to a people who didn't yet have revelation. But the siege by the Umayyads was a test for the believers. Would they stand for justice? Would they oppose tyranny? Would they honor the sanctity of the Kaaba even in political conflict? The miracle wasn't going to come from the sky. It had to come from the hearts of Muslims who would say, "This is wrong. We will not accept this." And some did. Many soldiers refused to continue the siege. Yazid himself died shortly after, and the siege was lifted. But the damage was done. Then came an even more painful event. In the year 317 AH, a group called the Karamita, a deviant extremist sect, attacked Mecca during the Hajj season. They slaughtered pilgrims in the Haram. They threw bodies into the well of Zamzam, and then they stole the black stone. They ripped it from the Kaaba and took it to their stronghold in Bahrain. For 22 years, the black stone was gone. The corner of the Kaaba was empty. Pilgrims would come and kiss the air where it used to be, weeping. So where was the protection? Why didn't Allah send birds? Why didn't the earth swallow the Karamita? Because by this time, Islam had spread across continents. The Kaaba was no longer the only symbol of Tawheed. There were millions of Muslims, thousands of masajid. The Qur'an was preserved, the Sunnah was documented, the religion was established. The Kaaba's physical existence, while sacred and central, was not the sole carrier of Islam anymore. The protection of the Deen was now in the hands, the hearts and the actions of the Ummah. And the fact that Muslims eventually negotiated, paid a ransom and brought the black stone back showed that the Ummah still cared, still honored it, still fought for it. That was the test. Not whether Allah would intervene, but whether we would. Here's the painful truth. We want Allah to solve our problems with miracles while we sit back and do nothing. We want the birds and stones while we abandon our responsibilities. But Allah doesn't work like that. He gave us the tools. He gave us the revelation. He gave us intelligence, strength, resources, and unity. And He said, "Now you carry the message. You protect the Deen. You establish justice. You defend the sacred." When we fail to do that, when we become weak, divided, negligent, the consequences fall on us. Not because Allah has abandoned us, but because we've abandoned our role. The Kaaba has been damaged and rebuilt multiple times throughout history. Floods destroyed parts of it. Structural issues required renovation. But every time, Muslims rebuilt it with their own hands, with their own wealth, with their own effort. And that's the point. The Kaaba is sacred, but it's a structure. What's more sacred is what it represents. The unity of the Ummah, the direction of our prayer, the symbol of Tawheed. And as long as Muslims exist who understand that, who honor that, who are willing to sacrifice for that, the essence of the Kaaba remains protected, even if the stones are touched. But carrying divine decree, they became more lethal than swords and spears. Allah was teaching a lesson. Power is not in size, it's not in numbers, it's not in weaponry. Power is in obedience to Allah. Abraha had elephants, the super weapon of his time. The Quraysh had nothing, but Allah sent birds. The contrast is staggering. It's the same lesson from Badr, 300 Muslims against 1,000. The same lesson from every battle where the believers were outnumbered and outmatched, yet they won. Not because they were stronger, but because Allah was with them. And when Allah is with you, it doesn't matter what you're facing. The weakest becomes the strongest. The smallest becomes the most effective. But this only works when you're on the side of truth, when you're defending what's sacred, when you've exhausted your own efforts and then relied completely on Him. Abdul Muttalib's statement, The house has a Lord who will protect it wasn't passivity. It was tawakkul after action. He didn't just sit in his house and say, Allah will handle it. He went to Abraha. He negotiated. He warned his people. He evacuated the city. He did everything humanly possible. And then, when there was nothing left to do, he put his trust in Allah. And that's when the miracle came. Allah doesn't send miracles to the lazy. He sends them to those who've exhausted their capacity and then turn to him with certainty. Compare that to the later incidents. When the Umayyads besieged Mecca, were the Muslims united? No. They were in civil war. Were they standing for justice? Debatable. Many were silent. Many were complicit. Many prioritized political loyalty over Islamic principle. When the Karamita attacked, where was the unified Muslim response? It took years to even negotiate the return of the Black Stone. The Ummah was fragmented, weak, divided into dynasties and sects. The absence of miraculous intervention wasn't Allah's abandonment. It was the natural consequence of the Ummah's own spiritual and political collapse. Here's the principle. Allah's miraculous intervention is a mercy, not an obligation. He can intervene whenever He wills, but He has also established a system of cause and effect, a system where your faith must be accompanied by action, where your dua must be accompanied by effort, where your reliance on Him must be built on a foundation of doing everything you can first. The companions understood this. At Badr, they didn't just stand and wait for angels. They fought with everything they had, and then Allah sent the angels to support them. At Uhud, when they disobeyed the Prophet's command and the archers left their posts, the angels didn't come. Why? Because they broke the system. They didn't follow the strategy, and consequences followed. This is critical for you to understand in your own life. You're waiting for a miracle, for Allah to just fix your situation without you changing anything. You want Him to give you a job without you applying. You want Him to heal your relationships without you making effort to reconcile. You want Him to strengthen your iman without you opening the Qur'an. You want Him to protect you from sin without you controlling your gaze or your desires. That's not how it works. Allah says, and that there is not for man except that for which he strives. You have to move, you have to try, you have to exhaust your means. And then, when you've done all you can, you make dua, you trust, and you wait for His decree. Sometimes the miracle is that your effort succeeds. Sometimes the miracle is that Allah opens a door you never saw. But the miracle never comes to the one who sits and does nothing. Destroyed or conquered, the entire social and spiritual landscape would have shifted. The Quraysh would have been humiliated, possibly enslaved or scattered. The city would have fallen under Christian Abyssinian control. The Kaaba, if destroyed, might have been replaced with a church. The Prophet's mission, which was deeply tied to Mecca, to the Kaaba, to reforming the system from within, would have faced insurmountable obstacles. So Allah's protection of the Kaaba was, in reality, a protection of the Prophet's future mission. It was preparing the ground, preserving the stage, keeping the city intact so that 40 years later, when the revelation began, there was a Kaaba to purify. There was a Mecca to call from. There was a Quraysh to challenge and eventually transform. Every detail of Allah's plan is interconnected. Nothing is random. The Year of the Elephant wasn't just a historical event. It was a prologue to the greatest chapter in human history, the coming of the final messenger. And this teaches you something profound about your own life. Sometimes Allah protects you from things you don't even realize. Sometimes He blocks a door that you were desperately trying to open, and years later you realize that behind that door was disaster. Sometimes He delays something you wanted, and later you see that the delay was mercy. Sometimes He removes people from your life, and it hurts, but eventually you understand that their presence would have destroyed you. Allah's protection isn't always visible, it's not always dramatic, but it's always there. and it's always perfectly timed. Now, what about the incidents after Islam? When the Kaaba was attacked, damaged, stolen from, why didn't Allah protect it the same way? Because the Kaaba's role had evolved. Before Islam, it was the only anchor. After Islam, the anchor became the Qur'an, the Sunnah, the community of believers. The Kaaba is sacred, it's the Qibla. It's the direction of unity, but it's not the source of guidance. The Qur'an is, and Allah promised to protect the Qur'an. Indeed, it is we who sent down the message, and indeed we will be its guardian. Not the Kaaba, not Mecca, not any physical structure. The message, because the message is what transforms hearts. The message is what survived the Mongol invasions, the Crusades, the colonial era, the modern attacks on Islam. The Quran remains unchanged, protected, preserved. Buildings can be destroyed and rebuilt. The Kaaba has been rebuilt multiple times. Even the original black stone has cracked and been repaired. But the words of Allah, not a single letter has changed in over 1400 years. That's the real miracle. That's the ongoing protection. And it's a protection that doesn't require birds or stones. It requires believers who memorize, who teach, who live by it. When millions of Muslims have the Quran in their hearts, you can burn every written copy, and it will be rewritten from memory the next day. That's divine protection through human vessels. So when you ask, why didn't Allah protect the Kaaba from other attacks? The answer is, He did. Just not in the way you expected. He protected it by giving Muslims the will to rebuild it. He protected it by preserving the sanctity of Mecca in the hearts of believers across the world. He protected it by ensuring that no matter what happens to the physical structure, the meaning, the direction, the spiritual significance remains untouchable. The Karamita stole the black stone, but they couldn't steal the iman of the pilgrims who kissed the empty space and wept. The Umayyads damaged the walls, but they couldn't damage the love Muslims have for that house. That's protection, just not the kind we're looking for. Here's the secret that will transform how you see everything. Allah's protection is always present, but its form changes based on what's needed. Before Islam, a physical miracle was needed to preserve the physical symbol. After Islam, spiritual resilience was needed to preserve the spiritual message. And in your life, the same principle applies. When you were a child, Allah protected you directly. Your parents fed you, clothed you, kept you safe. You didn't have to work for it. But as you grew, that protection shifted. Now you have to seek provision. You have to make choices. You have to navigate tests. Does that mean Allah abandoned you? No. It means He's teaching you to walk, to trust Him while using the faculties He gave you. Sometimes Allah protects you by blocking harm. Sometimes He protects you by giving you strength to endure harm. Sometimes He protects you by removing you from the situation. Sometimes He protects you by keeping you in it, but changing your heart so you can handle it. You want the miracle of the birds and stones in your own struggles. You want Allah to just remove your problems, delete your enemies, fix everything overnight without you having to do anything. But most of the time, that's not how His wisdom works. He's building you, teaching you, strengthening you, and that requires friction, resistance, tests. The Muslims, after the Prophet's death, didn't get constant miracles. They got the Quran, they got the Sunnah, they got each other. And with those tools, they spread Islam across the world. They didn't need birds to fight the Persians and Romans. They needed courage, strategy, and tawakkul. And Allah gave them victory, not through supernatural intervention in every battle, but through their own striving, supported by His divine assistance. That's the model. You strive, you struggle, you do everything in your power, and then Allah supports you in ways you might not even see until later. Think about the greatest tests of the Ummah. The Mongols destroyed Baghdad. They massacred millions. They burned libraries. They threw the books of knowledge into the river until the water ran black with ink. Where was the miraculous protection? But Islam survived. How? Because the message was in the hearts, not just the books. Because scholars fled and rebuilt. Because communities reorganized. Because the Ummah, despite being devastated, didn't abandon the Deen. That resilience, that refusal to give up, that was Allah's protection working through the believers. The Crusades, Europeans invaded Muslim lands for 2 centuries. They captured Jerusalem. They slaughtered thousands. Thousands. Where was the miracle? But eventually, Salahuddin came, a leader raised by Allah from among the Muslims who united them, purified their intentions, and liberated Al-Aqsa. Not through birds and stones, but through strategy, patience, and decades of preparation. That was Allah's help. It just looked like human effort, because that's how He works most of the time. He works through you. So why didn't Allah protect the Kaaba from every attack the way He protected it from Abraha? Because He was protecting something more important. He was protecting the faith of the believers. He was teaching the Ummah that our strength doesn't come from buildings. It comes from our connection to Him, that our identity isn't tied to geography. It's tied to belief. You can destroy Mecca, and Muslims will still face it in prayer from across the world. You can steal the black stone, and Muslims will still honor its corner. You can damage the Kaaba, and Muslims will rebuild it with more love than before. But if you corrupt the hearts, if you remove the Qur'an from the chests, if you disconnect the Ummah from their Deen, that's the real destruction. And that's what Allah protects against by giving us tests that wake us up. Sometimes the siege, the attack, the crisis is the mercy, because it forces us to return, to reflect, to ask, why is this happening? And if we're sincere, the answer is always the same. Because we moved away. Because we prioritized dunya over deen. Because we became comfortable and forgot our purpose. The Kaaba will stand until the end of time, and then it will be destroyed, not by an enemy, but by Allah's own command, when the world comes to an end. The Prophet said that in the end times, the Kaaba will be destroyed by a man from Abyssinia, piece by piece. And he said, "It is as if I can see him now, bald, with thin legs, destroying it stone by stone." When that happens, there will be no birds, no stones, no intervention. Because by then, the purpose of the Kaaba will have been fulfilled. The day of judgment will be near, and the test of this world will be over. Until that day comes, your job isn't to wait for miracles. Your job is to be the miracle. Be the one who protects the Deen by living it. Be the one who honors the Kaaba by praying toward it with presence. Be the one who preserves Islam by teaching your children. Be the one who defends truth even when it costs you. That's how Allah's protection manifests in this era. Not through birds, but through believers. Not through stones, but through steadfastness. Not through visible miracles, but through the quiet, powerful miracle of a heart that refuses to abandon Allah, no matter what the world throws at it. That's why Allah protected the Kaaba from Abraha, but allowed other trials. Because the first was a message to the deniers, the rest are tests for the believers. And the question isn't, why doesn't Allah intervene the same way anymore? The question is, are you strong enough in your iman to be His means of protection for this deen? That's the real test. And that's the real miracle waiting to happen through you.